I'm going to share with you a very simple trick that you can use to improve your writing, whether you want to pass an IELTS test or just want to improve your email writing. Watch for this. Hi, my name is Herbert Lee. I've been an English teacher for 15 years and an English student for well over 70 years. I learned English the hard way from school. I English is not my native language, and I actually had to learn it, like many of you. And writing was one of the biggest challenges I had, learning to write properly. But I was lucky. In grade 8, which is Form 2, I had a teacher, Miss Trapp, Miss Gertrude Trapp, wonderful teacher. She told us one day, she just got to the class and she said, I'm going to give you my special writing class. For the next 2 months, you will not have any history, geography, science, math, anything. You're going to have me all day. 3 hours in the morning, 2.5 hours in the afternoon. In the morning, you'll be writing, and in the afternoon, you'll be editing. So we spent a full 2 months writing in the morning, editing in the afternoon, writing in the morning, editing in the afternoon, Monday to Friday, nonstop for 2 months. And by the end of 2 months, we were really exhausted from the lessons because it was very tiring. We had to do a lot of work. But it was not until I got to grade 10, high school, senior high school, Form 4, grade 10 in Canada, that I realized the value of what Miss Tratt had given us. You see, when we passed in our assignment on the first day of English class, the next day, the English teachers looked at us and said, I want you and you and you and you, 6 of you, stay behind in the class. And we stayed behind the class, and she said, you 6, your writing is way better than any of the other students, and I want to know why. I want to know if you're getting your parents or someone to help you do the writing, because it's very obvious your writing is much better than the rest of the class. So we kind of looked at each other and said, yeah. She said, how do you know each other? Do you know each other? We said, yeah. She said, how do you know each other? We said, we went to Tower Road School. And she said, Tower Road School, I've heard about that. You have a teacher, Miss Tratt. She spends 2 months teaching you how to write. That's why you write better. Class, you can go home. Then we realized she had given us a very special gift. A few months later, we asked the teacher, what was the giveaway? How come she knew our writing was better? She said, the giveaway is you all learned how to use transitional phrases. We said, what's that? She said, well, you don't remember, but obviously Miss Tratt has taught you about transitional phrases. And transitional phrases are what makes a big difference in someone's writing. If you're a not so good writer, you don't use transitional phrases. If you're an excellent writer, you use transitional phrases correctly. Wow, what a gift we got, learning to use transitional phrases. And that's what I'm going to show you how to do in this episode. So you all know the 8 parts of speech: nouns, pronouns, adverbs, adjectives, conjunctions, articles, prepositions, and anyway, 8, right? There's 8. And you know that writing is made up of words. And when you went to school, when the teacher gave you an assignment, you said, how many words, teacher? So many people have the idea that writing is words on paper. So another way to look at it, though, is writing is ideas on paper, concepts on paper. When you look at writing that way, transitions are very important because transitions connect ideas. They link ideas. They make your writing flow. The most basic transition you already know. The word and. A-N-D. And can be used to connect words, phrases, and sentences, and ideas. But your writing can get pretty boring if the only transition you know is and. In English, there are about 50 transitions. You probably already know them, but like a lot of things we know, we don't use them when we write. So here are the 50 transitional phrases in English. There are only 50 of them. You'll know most of them, but you probably don't use most of them. So here's a refresher so that you know them and can start using them in your writing. Addition. Instead of just using and for everything, you can use also, in addition, to, moreover, and, besides, furthermore, equally important, then, finally, so. When you're using transitional phrases as an example, when you want to highlight an example, of course, you use your old standby, for example. But you can also use, for instance, thus, as an illustration, namely, or specifically. When you learn English in school, you learn all the punctuation marks: full stop, question mark, colon, semicolon, and exclamation mark. But when you get in the real world, into the business world, they say using an exclamation mark is very rude. So what do you use to emphasize? You can use phrases like above all, at the same time, certainly, most important, indeed, surely, for one thing, or in fact. When you want to use a transitional phrase to contrast two things, you can use phrases like but, yet, however, on the one hand, on the other hand, nevertheless, nonetheless, conversely, in contrast, still, at the same time. On the other hand, when you want to compare, you can use these phrases. Similarly, likewise, in the same way, equally important. Contrast is when you want to compare two different things. A comparison is when you want to compare two similar things. Concession is a very useful type of transition. If I were to write a recommendation letter for a student, let's say his name John, and I said, John is a very good student. I met him for over a year. He did all his homework on time. He always showed up on time. He was very participatory in class. He always answered the questions I asked him. I find him to be a perfect student. And I wrote that as a letter of reference for a job for John. What would you think if you were the employer? You'd think something's wrong because John is too good. But if I said, John is a good student, he comes on time, he does his homework, but I notice he has one particular habit. He likes to go on his desk sometimes, which is very annoying to the other students. However, I notice that John is trying to get rid of the habit. He knows it's not a good thing, and he's making an effort to get rid of that habit. So I admire John because he knows his own situation and tries to do the best. That's a concession, right? I've said something that's not so good about John, and now you believe the other things that I say. Very important to use concessions when you're writing so that not everything is perfect, and then people will believe you more. Concession transitions are, of course, to be sure, certainly, granted, after all, at the same time, nevertheless, and clearly. Purpose, concessions that you use for purpose, transitions that you can use for purpose would be for this purpose or for this reason. Result. When you're getting to the end of a piece of writing and you want to highlight the result, you can use these transitions. Therefore, thus, as a result, so, accordingly, or consequently. When you get to the end of your writing, you need to summarize your points, and you would use transitional phrases like these. Hence, in short, in brief, in summary, in conclusion, finally, and in closing. Time sequence transitions. First, second, third. Next, then, finally, afterwards, before, soon, later, meanwhile, subsequently, immediately, eventually, and currently. And finally, transitional phrases for place. In the front, in the foreground, in the back, in the background, at the side, adjacent, nearby, in the distance, here, and there. And those are all the transitional phrases we have in English. Transitions, when used correctly, are very powerful. Here are some tips for using transitions effectively in your writing. Transitions create flow and coherence by connecting ideas within and between paragraphs. Common transitional phrases and words include however, therefore, consequently, as a result. Include however, therefore, consequently, as a result. On the other hand, in contrast, similarly, moreover, likewise, in the same way, etc. Use transitions between sentences and paragraphs to show relationships such as compare, contrast, cause, effect, chronological order, to introduce an example or conclusion, etc. And this helps guide the reader through your logic and organization. It's very important to vary the transitions you use. Using the same transition word repeatedly can make your writing sound repetitive. Like we said about the word and. Try switching it up with synonyms to keep it interesting. Place transitions strategically. The best spot is usually at the start of a new paragraph or sentence, connecting back to the previous idea while introducing the new one. Make sure your transitions are the right ones for the logic you want to convey. For example, therefore implies a cause or effect that may not exist. Ensure that your usage makes contextual sense. Don't overuse transitions. While they're a very useful tool, too many transitions can make your writing sound choppy and hard to follow. Use them where you feel it's natural, but don't force them everywhere. Be purposeful with transitions. They should be used as signposts that guide the readers through your ideas. Make sure each one serves a specific purpose in your writing. With practice and close attention to logical relationships between ideas, you can use transitions effectively to create clear, coherent writing that flows well. And again, thank you, Miss Trapp, for teaching us transitional phrases. Now I hope you will use transitional phrases and improve your writing.